Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the East Baton Rouge Parish Library's Mid-City Microcon. Although this is our third year doing the Mid-City Microcon, this is our very first 100% virtual con. The Mid-City Microcon is a celebration of diversity in comic book characters, creators, and their fans. This event provides a free, inclusive opportunity for new and lifelong fans to find themselves in the world of comics and art, both on the page and behind the scenes. We strive to amplify the voices of creators who challenge the status quo, especially those who have been historically underrepresented in the comic book industry, and also local creators from Baton Rouge and Louisiana. Unlike many comic book conventions, the Mid-City Microcon does not charge a fee to vendors nor attendees, thereby allowing more freelance, independent, and self-published creators a space to showcase their work. For more information about this year's Microcon, as well as previous years, please visit our website at ebrpl.com/mcmc. Thank you.
So first, I want to hit you guys with some sort of facts. By the way, my name is Stephen Andes. I'm a professor at LSU. I teach Latin American history. And I found some interesting data, and this is online, freely available from the Pew Research Center. And so as of July 2020, it was estimated that Latinx people made up approximately 18% of the United States population, right? So with the 2020 census coming up, I'm sure that will increase. So we're talking about at least 61 million Americans. As Pew stated, Latinos accounted for about half, 52% of all US population growth over this period. They are the country's second largest racial or ethnic group behind white non-Hispanics. So the question is, how and in what ways are Latinx people represented in comics and beyond? In reality, the largest racial ethnic group behind white people, Latinxes are largely absent from media. And perhaps where they are present, they can also be absent as well. One of our panelists, Bill Nericcio, along with Frederick Luis Aldama, has recently written a book titled Talking #Brown TV. And they say that Latinxes are 18% of the population, yet they are less than 3% represented on screens across the US. Right? And so in today's panel, we aim to dive deep into the question of what is authentic representation and how do we build inclusive story worlds. So before we get into this question, I want to introduce our esteemed panelists, our guest experts, artists, writers who represent the past, present, and future of building authentic story worlds that include Latinx voices. So first, I'd like to introduce Javier Hernandez. He is a cartoonist and educator. He's been publishing through his imprint, Los Comics, since 1998, and his signature character, El Muerto, has appeared in live-action films, right, in 2007. Javier has been teaching comic workshops since 2003 and also conducts lectures on Latino comics. In 2011, he co-founded the Latino Comics Expo, the nation's first convention dedicated to showcasing the works of Latino creators in comics and related popular arts. So in a minute, we'll hear from all the panelists, but I just wanted to introduce you guys. So second, we have Henry Barajas. He is a Latinx author from Tucson, Arizona. He is best known for his recent graphic memoir about his great-grandfather, Ramon Jauregui, titled La Voz de Mayo, Tatarambo. He has contributed to anthologies, many of which that benefit mass shooting Route 91 victims in the Southern Poverty Law Center, such as Where We Live and The Good Fight. Currently, Barajas is Director of Operations at Top Cow Productions, and he lives in Los Angeles. Also, we have with us William Memo Nericcio. He is among many different things, but what I will highlight today, he is director of San Diego State University Press and runs A Model Comics, an innovative publisher of graphic narratives, i.e. comics. And already there are 3 volumes under their belt, and A Model Comics is publishing some of the most outstanding contemporary graphic narratives around today. His latest book, as I said, co-authored with Frederick Luis Aldama, is Talking #Brown TV Latinas and Latinos on the Screen, and it appeared in 2019. So taking it back to our framing question, what is authentic representation, especially as it relates to Latinx people, and how do you build inclusive story worlds? And what I wanted to do first was to let each of you have about 5 minutes to share some of your work and your reflections on this question. So Javier, why don't we go ahead and start with you, and you can tell us about El Muertos, about Los Comics. You also have a new sort of El Muerto comic that is coming out soon that we're all excited for.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you, Stephen, finally,
yeah.
Visually at least. Yeah, so I've been making comics for 22 years. I self-publish my work, which means I finance it all myself. So I take all the credit for it because it's just me. I write and draw my own comics. My first comic I did was this book featuring this character, El Muerto. And I've done other comic characters over the years, but I always go back to this one. And I kind of put myself on this path a couple of years ago to, you know, focus on this character exclusively and knock out a 10-volume graphic novel series. It's always better to start that in your 20s probably, but so I'm gonna have to be really cranking out pretty rapidly in the next decade or so. But yeah, there was a film made of the comic in 2007, which I got squeeze myself a little cameo in the movie. And yeah, I've been teaching. I love teaching comics. If I'm not making comics, I'm teaching them or talking about them. So I'm lucky in that regard that I'm pretty much just focusing on, you know, that which I love the most: comic books, comic narratives, and such, visual storytelling. And yeah, I'm starting working on the second graphic novel. Yeah, thanks for showing the web shop up there. The second book, Casa del Diablo. I did a preview comic, which I just did through my first Kickstarter. After like all these years of you know, self-financing the books or doing pre-orders, I decided to try out this Kickstarter model, which I really recommend people look into. It's a great way to, you know, crowdfund your comic, which basically people are kind of pre-ordering the comic. But of course, you know, you got to make sure you produce the book. That's always an issue. And we just announced last night we're doing our new Latino comic book expo in 2 weeks, September 13th through 19th. It's going to be online, of course. This is 2020, remember? And we're partnering once again with our wonderful friends at the in Long Beach at the MOLA, the Museum of Latin American Art. So it's been a huge learning curve, which I'm sure Jessica could attest to, figuring out how to do your convention with all your panels and everything, and then move it online. So we're looking forward to that. And looking forward to speaking with the rest of the speakers here. And thanks for the library for hosting this.
Yeah, great. I am a huge El Muerto fan, and so I'm really excited for the new volume to come out. So let's move on to Henry. Henry, could you tell us a little bit about your work? I loved La Voz de Mayo, Tata Rambo. Tell us a little bit about some of what inspired this work, how, you know, because this is really a work, a nonfiction graphic narrative, and how you as a journalist sort of invested yourself into this project.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much, Stephen, for the kind words. And my name is Henry Barajas. I am the author of La Voz de Mayo, Tata Rambo. It's about my great-grandfather, Ramon Jauregue. He was a orphan, a World War II veteran, a Chicano activist, and he helped lead the social change in Tucson, Arizona in the late 60s, all through the 70s, helping the Pascoyaqui tribe maintain their footprint in their land in the Sonoran Desert, which eventually became Tucson, Arizona. The city of Tucson and its officials were trying to grow around the tribe. At a certain point, they wanted to build the Interstate 10 freeway through their land. So my great-grandfather started this organization called La Voz de Mayo, the voice of Mexican, American, Yaqui, and others. So they had helped the tribe maintain their land, install plumbing, sidewalks, electricity, trash collection. And my great-grandfather, Ramon, was very instrumental in helping them with that and being the liaison between the tribe, the community, and the local government, and also helping them start one of the first low-cost clinics that helped the community that offered contraceptives. Like Javier, I crowdfunded the first 3 chapters of the book, and I was very grateful that my boss at Top Cow Productions, which is a subsidiary of Image Comics, they were kind enough to publish what I had crowdfunded and what I was able to afford to pay my artist, Jay Gonzo, who is a co-collaborator on the project. Without him, it would just be a bunch of words. So I'm greatly indebted to his ability to tell my story about my family and about my hometown, which I love so much. As you're seeing in the preview on the screen, those are the first couple pages, and it looks like things haven't really changed with police brutality and protesters. This all takes place from a protest where I took my great-grandfather to his last protest in solidarity of Rosa. She was she sought asylum in the Southside Presbyterian Church, where she had lived there for 400 days to avoid deportation, to avoid being stripped from her family and her land. And my great-grandfather was a champion of keeping families together, and I wanted him to leave this earth on his 2 feet and go on a march and fight for what's right. So it's interesting to kind of see things have never changed. And watching this type of like political discourse of immigration and just the mistreatment that this country has with its indigenous people and its migrants that make this country so great and beautiful, that nothing's really changed. And being so close to the border, this is something that I've lived with. My family was, arrested and deported, and we had to pick them up on the border. And so this was like a big story, not only about my great-grandfather, about myself and searching for answers, because all the achievements that him and La Voz de Mayo had done, they weren't documented properly. And thankfully, my great-grandfather had writings, photos, and a newsletter called La Voz de Mayo that's printed in the back of the book, so that you could see where I got my information and where I was drawing inspiration from. And my family actually had done some investigative work for me, had some newspaper articles that are also in the book. But yeah, as far as Latinx representation, I think it should come from a level of authenticity and love, and from people that can tell these stories and give them a chance. There's not a lot of opportunities for, brown people, black people, indigenous people of color that don't get a seat at the table, at a writer's table, or at the publisher's table, or even in many different levels. So I think there's, if you want to tell Latinx stories, if you want to publish Latinx stories, I think it's very important to have Latinx people in your space.
Yeah, no doubt. Good. All right. We're just getting warmed up. So hopefully Luisa will be able to join us at some point. But for now, last but not least, William Nericcio, I am hugely honored that you were available to be on this panel. So if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work. I know you're excited about A Model Comics as I am, and so we're looking forward to hearing about it. And you're on mute right now. There we go.
You're missing my dulcet tones. Now, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Cool.
Loud and clear.
You can't get more authentic than the way I was injected or inculcated at a very early age into the cult of comic books, right? When I was little, my big sister Josie, who's a film editor in Hollywood now, she and I were babysat sometimes during the day. My father was a postal worker. My mother was a telephone operator in Laredo, Texas. Viva Texas, right? And Anna would take care of us. She was a great cook, greatest hamburgers, but she had this habit, and I think it really left a lifelong impression on me. She loved comic books, but she was also ashamed of it. You know how comics are kind of like, ay, Diosito mío, you know, he's reading comics. ¿Qué es eso? What's that? So she would hide them underneath the mattress of her bed. And that's where me and Josie would climb, and we would dig, and one of us would hold up the mattress and pull out these precious comics, Archie comics, Sad Sack, Harvey comics, Casper, Richie Rich. Not much on the superheroes. It was mostly Harvey and Archie, a little Lulu. And we would read them and laugh at them. And, you know, we're not growing up in the American Midwest. We're not growing up in Poughkeepsie. You know, we are in Laredo, Texas, 8 blocks from the U.S.-Mexican border. My grandmother, Ana Juarez, and her family had been in Laredo since it was central Mexico. That is the border crossed her and her family. And so comics have always been a part of my life. I've always drawn, and I like to think of my life as a professor as a kind of an exit I took, and now I'm coming back. I'm coming back to my grandmother's bed. I'm coming back to the comics, and that sounded slightly Freudian. I'm teaching Freud this week, but I'll leave that to one side. I'm just really excited about being part of this wave of publishing. And maybe if I have a little time later, I'll talk more about where the idea came to me, or where I stole the idea for Ahmad Comics.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm interested a little bit to hear, you know, from each of you. Bill sort of alluded to this, but what were some of the story worlds that you encountered as a kid? You know, not only the worlds that you encountered that sort of drew you in, but also like some of the first kind of, whether comics, TV, movies, that you saw yourself represented in any way, or that you connected with in some way. And how did that impact you? How about Javier? Why don't we start with you?
Well, probably like most people here, right, in the U.S., I grew up just watching, you know, regular TV and cartoons. You know, the Adam West Batman TV show, Speed Racer. You know, I read a bunch of comics my brother gave me when I was a kid. You know, it's the classic Marvel, DC stuff. So those are the characters you grew up with. But as you get older, once in a while something peeps through. Like in the mid '70s, there was this issue of Spider-Man featuring this character called the White Tiger. He kind of looks like the Black Panther, but it's all white, and he's got, I think, 2 little slit eyes. And it turned out he was Puerto Rican. He was a Puerto Rican martial artist. This is the '70s, remember? So in the comic I read, I think Bill Mantlo was the writer. He threw in a little bit of Spanish here and there. Then when you grow up, you see some of it wasn't correct, but I gave him an A for effort. And as a kid, you know, as I'm reading the comic, I'm reading Spider-Man, and then here's this Puerto Rican character, and he's throwing in a little Spanish in between, you know, some of his word balloons. So that you know, that was like a big deal. Like, oh wow, you know, characters can speak Spanish in comics. And then you start seeing more and more stuff. And then as I got older, then you hear about the Hernandez brothers, no relation, Jaime and Beto with Love and Rockets. You know, that was a huge, that was like a bombshell in the comic publishing world, right? These guys doing like completely authentic Latino stories, you know, growing up in the Oxnard and such. And so things would peek through here and there. And then, of course, you know, you see the Speedy Gonzalez when you're a kid. We can debate all that, right? Right or wrong. And then, of course, Zorro, which I think Stevens has heard of that character before. So as you're growing up, you see things here and there. And then, of course, you know, I could code switch, as they call it, you know, at home. I'm watching, you know, Addams Family on one room, and next room, mom and dad are watching, you know, Siempre en Domingo or novelas or whatever, you know, Chavo del Ocho. So, and you're growing up with 2 types of music in the house. So back then it was just kind of like a normal thing, right? Like, okay, we're in America, everything's in English, but then I got that other side of me, that background where it's in Spanish and Spanish TV and such. So when I got older, I think I got started late making comics, but I was probably about 30. It's like, damn it, I got to make my own comic. And I definitely want to do something based on like a Mexican cultural background. And because I self-published, I didn't have to run it by anybody. You know, who knows what they would have said back in 98. But I ended up doing this character where I took some Day of the Dead folklore and Aztec mythology, which back in the 90s, I don't know how many comics you would ever find that in. Put them together and came up with this character, El Muerto. So I guess what makes my work authentic was just, you know, it's just coming from a Mexican-American kid growing up, you know, in this bicultural, bilingual household. So yeah, thank you. That's my statement, Judge.
Yeah. Thank you, Javier. Henry, what are some of the things that you remember, you know, sort of growing up with and sort of connecting with or not connecting with in sort of your sort of formative years?
In my formative years, I was reading like Vertigo comics. I became obsessed with Stray Bullets by David and Maria Lapham, and just really got into noir stuff. Growing up, I lived in a college town, Tucson, Arizona, so kids would leave the U of A and leave all their comics, and their parents and grandparents would just throw it in a giant box and leave it on the curb and or sell it at yard sales, and my mom and dad would pick them up and take them to me. So I had an array of 90s comics, Batman, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, a lot of superhero tights and stuff. So I tried to draw my own and was never a good artist, but the only thing I was really good at was writing as a kid. But my parents didn't want to teach me Spanish. They didn't want me to sound ghetto. We had zero connection to our indigenous roots, and my mom's side was Pascuayaki. The only thing we would do is go to the annual Easter fariseos, where we would go to the ceremonies in the middle of the desert sometimes. And those were always beautiful because of the food and the connection that you have with family and stuff. But it never really resonated with me until I went to high school and took a Native American studies class and realized, oh yeah, this is a part of me. And even at that time, I had a history teacher that used mouse to illustrate the Holocaust to us. And I was, oh, good, Louisa's here. Just want to acknowledge her. I'm so glad. Yeah. So I mean, in my whole life, I wanted to be in comics. Then I started to write about comics. I started to self-publish comics. I created a comic called El Loco with a political cartoonist, Arnie Bermudez. Then I created another comic called Captain Unicorn. So I was doing these like very political superheroes that weren't really interesting to any publishers. So I ended up kind of putting that on hold and focusing on my journalism career. Oh, glad you're able to make it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'd like to yield my time for Louisa. So
yeah, no, just joining us. We have Luisa Restrepo, and I'm so glad this worked out. We were just talking a little bit about some of early influences in sort of media representation and stuff like that. But just for our viewers at home, we have Luisa Restrepo. And she was raised between Bogota and Medellin, Colombia, and she earned her Bachelor of Fine Arts in 2010 and her Master of Fine Arts degree from LSU in 2013. She's an instructor in the Department of Graphic Design at LSU and serves as the creative director for the Graphic Design Student Office. She's received several awards and honors for her work with the Graphic Design Student Office, and she's also a board. Can she hear?
Oh no, doesn't look like she can hear us.
That was so beautiful, though, Steve.
It was so yeah, I know. Like she doesn't even know. But she is also a board member at the Baton Rouge Gallery. So whenever she is able to hear us and stuff like that, she can tell us some about her art. But meanwhile, we can go over to Bill, and you've alluded to a little bit of growing up in Laredo, sort of this sort of place, you know, in the sort of South Texas, and what are some of your early influences, or the where you sort of find yourself as a kid growing up, what you saw in media and comics and stuff like that?
I guess for me, the earliest memories are watching the fights and lucha libre with my father. Him drinking Schlitz beer and Tareyton cigarettes. It's my earliest memory. But my father was a news hound. He had wanted to be a lawyer. He ended up being a postal clerk. And he just loved the news. So I can remember Walter Cronkite. We didn't have cable. Huntley and Brinkley, I remember the nightly news, and then I remember the lucha libre. In fact, in my mind, I mean, this is the essence of being Chicano. You know, it's Mil Máscaras and Johnny Carson, or Raúl Velasco from Siempre de Domingo and Johnny Carson side by side. And of course, Speedy Gonzalez is in there, and he was such an obsession. I went on to publish scholarly articles about him. He's in my first book, Text Mex. Mad Magazine, huge impact. Al Jaffe, Sergio Aragonés, Antonio Projías, the Cuban illustrator of Spy vs. Spy. I used to trace all these things on my kitchen table. And finally, Charles Schulz, Peanuts. What a master of timing and minimalism. Between him and Ernie Bushmiller and Mad Magazine and Lucha Libre and the smoke from my father's Tareytons, my destiny was set.
That's great. So, you know, like, I think there is, you know, the way, you know, growing up in America, obviously, there is a sense of this mix, you know, pop culture is so much of a mixture, right? And so we alluded to it a little bit with Henry, you know, in what sense is there, like, do authentic stories... Hey, there she is. Luisa. Luisa, can you hear us?
I have a sneaking suspicion she's on a PC. I'm not sure. That's my prejudice. It's my
I can hear you, Luisa, when you just said hello. I think she's calling.
Yeah.
Luisa, can you hear us?
That sounds like buffering.
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear us now?
Yes. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you. Perfect.
I'm trying literally like everything, guys.
You know what? You're fine. If you just stay right where you are and speak, then we can hear you and see you perfectly.
Awesome.
So I just introduced you. It was a beautiful introduction. And I heard
it. I heard it. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Okay, good.
You just couldn't hear me.
Right. Okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, you know, some of your work, graphic design, your artwork, your work at LSU, and perhaps tell us a little bit about your journey and telling an authentic story about yourself, about, I know some of your artwork includes, you know, Latin American sort of indigenous themes in it and stuff like that. And so just tell us a little bit more about you and your work.
Yeah, definitely. So I had a presentation. I had a few pictures to show you. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to share them right now, but I'll tell you a little bit of kind of what I do. So as you said, I'm from Colombia. I was raised between Bogota and Medellin. I have lived there pretty much all my life. I've been here in the United States only for 10 years, which seems like a lifetime to me, but it's very little time. I started in the College of Art and Design. I'm in there a professor and a creative director for a little kind of agency that we have. I serve also as a board member, like you said, for the Baton Rouge Gallery, so I'm very involved with the community. My journey kind of here and what my work kind of revolves around is a lot of cultural identity. I have embraced where I'm from. I'm very proud of being Colombian, and I'm 100% all in at all times. Love to talk about it and share my experience through that. So my work, or the one that I wanted to talk about today, it's called Intermix. And in that intermix, I combine symbolism from pre-Columbian art with more elements from the present. I like to share the beauty and the rich ethnic traits of my culture with my own words, and I use design to do that. So most of my work, it's heavily influenced by gold work from the pre-Columbian era, is what I really am interested about. I always love how intricate their designs are and how creative they are. And from a graphic perspective, I mean, they're just really interesting to look at. But honestly, really what got everything started is that I started to think of what could be like an effective visual representation of a culture and its identity. I wanted to express or say something about the people, but using symbols. I was in a not written way, in a visual way. I wanted to tell a story. Gold and clay were kind of like my main points of interest, because it was in my research, it was an interesting turning point for me, because social and political structures changed when those materials came to the pre-Columbian era. And in there, it was interesting to find that only very privileged civilizations had access to gold. So in there already, it's kind of like a very interesting niche. And in there, what got me all interested about the particular symbolism is that they classified all their artifacts into three different sets of values. And in those values, there was like, is it valuable because of its usage? Is it valuable because of its exchange? Or for the value of it as a pure symbol, as a representation of power, as a representation of who they are? And that's kind of where I found myself kind of really intrigued to look for more stuff. So I'm going to refer you later to like my website, and you can see some of this work. But I have a very long piece where I created a set of like 76 patterns, creating and using that symbolism from using only like facial representations that they use in the gold artifacts, trying to kind of compare and contrast kind of in a playful way of the hide and seek, to talk about the individuals and the tribes, but at the same time seeing them display all as a whole, almost like a quilt, where they're all one big heritage, where they're all one big group, that regardless of them being very different and very unique to their particular tribes, they all represent really what the traits of what my culture it's all about. Then, in there, I like to bring things from other cultures, not as an appropriation, but I like the symbolism that other cultures use. And in there, for me, everything kind of goes from starts from a very aesthetic point of view, and I've always loved mandalas. I draw mandalas and I color mandalas. They give me a good sense of feeling calm. So I started creating mandalas with the symbolisms because they mean this kind of sense of universe, the sense of a structure of like life itself, this larger thing that using the symbolism and configuring in kind of in this concentric forms, it was not only visually pleasant, but it had kind of an understory of kind of representing a whole culture in just one particular shape. And then this is all part of one big body of work. And then so going kind of like full circle on it, at the end, I wanted to really, the purpose of the work was to really look for a greater perspective on my past, and to coming to realize that it was necessary for me to understand where I come from, to better understand who I am. And not only for today or for tomorrow, but really for the future. It's really kind of, for me, was kind of a tipping point of really embracing it and understanding it and really researching about it to decide kind of what that means for me, what means for me now. And I created this totem sort of prints that were to represent kind of that sacred object or that symbol that serves as an emblem for a group of people, because it was my thank you to them. It was my appreciation for those that were before me that got me here. And then it was also kind of like my opportunity to give back. In a sense, this work is just one example of many that I think of, many that I have done, many that hopefully will keep coming up, because it's a representation of me, it's an extension of me and what I have discovered of myself in the process of putting myself out there. Right. So that's what, for me, kind of working with things like this means, and where I find that is really important to have more authentic stories, where it's not that you have to follow someone's rules. It's where you listen, and when you have the facts, or you go after something that you want to chase, and then you mix it with how that impacts you and how it represents really what you want to say.
Yeah, no, so I mean, one of the things that, sparks my imagination when I am listening to you speak and the rest of us is this notion of the use of symbols, totems, right? Images. Bill in some of his work has talked about the idea of stereotyping, and how, in some ways, the etymology of that word really comes from this sort of typing, right? Like putting a figure out there, and it leaves a mark, right? It leaves a mark. Go ahead, Bill. You can.
Well, tipting, the ass end of stereotype, right? It comes from the Greek word for impact. Right. Something that strikes you. That's why we will never eliminate stereotypes, because in essence they are part of our linguistic cognitive structure. Right. And so the best we can do, I think, is inoculate ourselves against them. But I wanted to follow up on something Luisa was saying. Can I share some pictures?
Yeah.
Please do.
All right. You should be seeing some cutout dolls. Do we have picture?
Yes.
All right, cool. I became a professor at a time where ideas like authenticity and truth were not everyone's thing. So I think we should be very careful about the word authenticity. I know as a publisher, the line between what is authentic and what is gimmicky or stereotypical, it's a razor's edge. In my own graphic work, like the first two I'm going to show you here, this is an idea I'm trying to play with. I have a traveling exhibition, an art show called Mextasy that's just full of these graphic works that kind of foreground the constructedness, not of only of Latino or Mexican or Chicano bodies, but of white bodies, right? The ideals, the Caucasian kids, right? So I came up with this word called Chicanasmosis because I wanted to describe the way what happens in Laredo and San Isidro, San Diego. Along the border, you get a bleeding together of cultures. There's a semi-permeable layer between Mexico and the United States, across which elements fly, like the Ramones were huge in TJ, right? Gloria Trevi was huge in San Diego. We get these crossovers. So I call it Chicanasmosis. One of the most peculiar is this one, right? Chávez del Ocho, Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens, right? And Mexico, a star of entertainment for children and for children, the young at heart. Same with Paul Rubens as Pee Wee Herman. We've got two vatos, two dudes who make a living out of dressing like they're little kids. Pee Wee's a little bit more complex because he dresses like a little kid dressing up as an adult. Very, very peculiar. So this is the kind of stuff that I do in my own artistic graphic work. I like to foreground the intermixedness of the American and Mexican context in a way that foregrounds the fact that what we call authenticity is sometimes very much hybridity, a kind of fusion of things. But I want to talk about Amador Comics and my publishing world, but I think I'll hold off until you give me the cue, Stephen.
Yeah, no, that's perfect because I think please go ahead because the way in which Amador Comics obviously comes from this Nahua word meaning paper, right?
Right.
So Luisa was talking about her influences in sort of pre-Columbian sort of cultures and indigenous cultures, and so please go ahead.
Yeah, well, it was a very easy thing to call it Amador Comics, using the Nahua word for the paper that the Mexica used to make their codices, right? And there it is. This is the splash page for Amador Comics with the work of the other Jaime Hernandez, right? The other Hernandez, not brother of Javier. And I work at San Diego State University. Unfortunately, our mascot is the Aztecs. Fortunately and unfortunately, it depends. How I wake up some mornings, where I feel on that. The whole idea of indigenous as mascots, kind of problematic right now. But I went with it and I said, well, let's do real honor to the Mexica and their intellectual legacy that was largely burned by the Spanish, stupid asshats. And so let's name this comic book company Amador Comics. And so we've had 3 issues, like you mentioned. Oh, this is just, before there was Amador Comics, I'm a graphic designer for SDSU Press. Now I'm the director of SDSU Press. And one of the things I like to do is showcase brilliant Americans and brilliant Mexicans side by side. This is an example of this. This is the work of photographer Antonio Turok from Mexico with the political scientist Alvaro Huerta, who teaches at Cal State Pomona. So you could see here that even in the publishing vision of SDSU Press, we have this kind of impetus to show the fusion of Mexico and America politically and intellectually. I'm going to foreground that intellectual thing, even though it turns off a lot of folks, just because we can't run away from the fact that we need now, more than ever, intelligence. Not pointy-headed intellectuals telling you how you're wrong or you speak wrong. We need intelligent people to be running the joint. All right. So this is another example. This is the work of Perry Vasquez with his version of Coatlicue, doing the cover for Daniel Olivas' book on Latino-Latina literature. This was Amador Comics #1, More Than Money, by a woman from Mexico, Claudia Dominguez, who wrote a story about her father being kidnapped. I could not think, I was so proud to be able to, this is my first comic that I've ever published in my life. I'm so proud of it. Her work is unique. All of the works I'm mentioning, by the way, just to plug, are available via Jeff Bezos's awful machine at Amazon. And but you can also come to our website, sdsupress.sdsu.com. This was our second issue of Amadal Comics, which was Latinx comic book storytelling by the man who never sleeps, Frederick Luis Aldama, who when we started this thing, he had 40 books published. I'm sure by the end, there's gonna be 47. The man is hated by the Lorax. I mean, he's killing too many trees with all his books. I tell him every day, stop it. Anyway, I contributed to the problem. We published this brilliant book, fully illustrated, full color. All our books are comic book sized, by the way, even though this is a graphic collection anthology of interviews and Aldama being brilliant. It's a comic book. It's colorful, brilliant, and it'll introduce you to close to 30 or 40 Latinx comic book storytellers, some of whom you know, and some you've never met. And lastly, our latest comic, of course, The Phantom Zone and Other Stories by Jose Alanis. There should be I'm so tired of seeing Narcos. Every time, you can't turn on Netflix without some Mexican shoving a gun down someone's mouth or killing someone, right? I want to see a teledrama about Jose Alanis. He's from the lower Rio Grande Valley, and so you're probably thinking, oh, those Tejanos, they stick together. No, I'd never met this guy. He's a professor of Slavic studies at the University of Washington, fluent in Russian, teaches Slavic literature. Oh, and on the side, he's this Chicano cartoonist. And for our third issue, we put together an anthology of his work from across his lifetime. And so that's Amadal Comics. All right, enough, I'm out.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I mean, I think one of the things that comes up for me in thinking about this topic is the way in which, exactly, right? So if we think about Javier, your work on El Muerto, infusing sort of Aztec deities with Day of the Dead imagery and stuff like that. But then at the same time, and we think about your work as authentic, right? But then everywhere, my students in my Mexican history class are like, all they know about Mexico is something to do with like the Day of the Dead or something.
Frida Kahlo.
Right, Frida Kahlo, or like these tropes, right? And so what is that razor's edge within your work, Javier, or with Luisa or Henry or Bill, in trying to define how you are presenting something that is real and important as opposed to something that is just reinforcing kind of the images of Latinxes in America, etc.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, for me, like El Muerto, the starting points is definitely the Day of the Dead and the Aztec mythology. But it's just the starting point because there's so much in there. And what I want to do as an author, as a writer, yeah, I'm Latino, and I wanted to make sure my first comic was definitely a very Mexican cultural identity. But I have as much aspiration as any writer or filmmaker, like a John Carpenter or a Ian Fleming or whoever. Like, I just want to tell stories. I'm going to pull from Mexican culture when I can, which is a big part of it. But there's so much I want to do is in the stories. It's not always just like, yeah, what's like the most current Mexican trend I can put in there or something. It's just part of it's like me, Mexican culture, Mexican American culture is part of my background. But I'm also, into like Japanese manga and anime and, horror films and all that. So, yeah, Muerto is just a vehicle for me to express myself. So part of me is, Mexican. Part of me is, a fan of horror, a fan of drama, a fan of comedy. As an artist, as a cartoonist behind the book, I want to kick myself in the butt to be as visually interesting as I can. So I pull a lot of stuff from American comics and film, and so it's just a complete mixture of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, the starting point for me always was like, plant that flag of a Mexican cultural identity. But for me, that's not the only thing that drives my work. Right.
Yeah. Henry, I wonder, with your work with La Voz de Mayo, all art is intimate and autobiographical to some extent, but you are very explicit in that you show up as a character in your story, right? And I wonder if you can kind of talk about some of these issues of authenticity, representation, in your quest to tell a sort of historical story, right? To put the actual sort of La Voz de Mayo newsletter in there to show that this isn't just a story that you've made up, that this is real, that this has roots, this is something that was.
Oh no, it's all made up. I forged all those documents.
Oh jeez.
Cool. Well, that was surprising.
Thank you. Yeah, my ex-girlfriend said it was narcissism to put myself in my own book. But
well, we're
letting the masses dictate that. But just to piggyback off of what Javier said, what I love about Latino, Latina, Latinx, however you want to dice it, everyone has their own specific experience as a person of color in this country, telling stories. There's a lot of people of Afro, Latinx, Afro-Cuban. There's just so many ways to turn this beautiful puzzle into a beautiful image that we can share with the world. And mine specifically speaks to, from where I come from, my father's from Mexico, from Juarez. My mother's family is indigenous to the Sonoran Desert. So for whatever reason, they wanted me to be American. They didn't want me to sound like I had any background or any kind of flavor or culture. They wanted me to be American. So I find myself at 31 years old trying to go back and see what I missed and how I can share that. And La Voz de Mayo was just a story that I needed to tell. Whether it was going to come out through Image Comics, Top Cow Productions or not, didn't matter. It was just something I needed to do for myself, for my great-grandfather, for my community, for the Pascoyaqui tribe. And then my next story, like Javier said, I don't want to just be boxed in as that guy who writes about Latinx or Latino history. I want to tell a fantasy story. And the idea behind it is, what if Mordor, Lord of the Rings, had a south side? There was, an Aztec world, a Mesoamerican history that was undiscovered like we are in now. So I think it's very important that if you're watching and you are a person of color, that you don't have to limit yourself to who you are or speak to or be the mouthpiece of your people. You have the freedom to tell whatever story you want, but it's also important to tell your story however you want, because we need your voice and we need more people of color. We need more Black and Indigenous and Latinx people putting more stories out there, because if you're not going to do it, some white guy who's written a video game is going to get hired to do something and speak for you. Right. Or speak about you and do a very disingenuous story that really just puts us backwards. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very important. Or a movie, a lot of people from Hollywood and TV love to come into the comic book medium and tell a story about a Latino woman or a Latino man and have just really no prowess of what that all entails, because it's complicated. We're not all the same.
Right. Yeah, and I think that, the images that we become familiar with that are easily digestible or consumable are such because they're so simple, right? Or they're easy to sort of take, right? And so I wonder, Luisa, with your work, especially dealing with and so they lack nuance, right? But Luisa, you told us about the way in which you looked at these different elements, these sort of physical elements, but in how those made it into your artwork, and they had a huge symbolism. But that symbolism is oftentimes lost on many within culture that just see, oh, well, that is some sort of indigenous symbol that they don't understand, or even the way in which that symbolism is used in advertising. And so I wonder, in your space as a graphic designer, how you have encountered the lack of nuance in representation of Latinx people, and how you sort of sit with that, how your presence has been important in trying to dispel that, or to sort of nuance that.
Well, I think that what I have discovered with kind of this work is that putting it out there, it starts a conversation, and that's a good starting point. Pushing it out there and letting other people see it and wonder what it is about. And even if they don't have the right sense of what it is, they wonder what it is. And then if you stick around, or if you continue with this work and you follow it up with a little bit of an explanation, or a little bit of that you bring to it, it brings the conversation, and it is the opportunity for change. So that visual language becomes the language that, regardless of where you're from, or if we speak the same actual language, because my first language is Spanish. I mean, these things are not things that I researched, that I didn't know of. I grew up around these things. So for me, it was actually from a different point of view, not that I grew up knowing that I was part of this culture, but I was not exposed to it. For me, it was the opposite, is that I was always flooded with images of these kinds of styles and representations, and I just never really paid a lot of attention to them because they were always there. They were part of my everyday. And once you have an opportunity to kind of walk away from that, and you get, call it, a little bit sentimental, or I don't know, I feel like when you move out of your place, out of what you really call home, it's sort of you feel like this responsibility, at least that's how I see it, that you need to be like a good representative of your people, of your culture, of where you're from. So for me, it's like, imagine if somebody gave me the title that I was the ambassador of Colombia. And by no means I'm no expert about everything Colombian, and I have so much to learn. But for me, what I love about doing this work is just that. It's just like, oh, that's cool. And it starts in the cool. And then it's just like, what do you think about it? What do you like about it? And in that conversation, I guess, is the graphic design side of me, that I'm not just pushing it out there to say what I want to say, but for me, I actually want to hear back what you have to say about it. And I want to have that dialogue. I want to have that conversation. I want to hear what you interpret from what you're seeing. So that's how in design, I guess, since we are more of a collaborative art, that we work most of the time for somebody else. We are artists for hire in a good, in a sense. But with your conditions, when I step out of that particular role of I'm doing this for you and I'm doing it for me, I still want somebody else involved in it. It's not just to expose it, but it's to also get kind of that sort of feedback. And like everything, when you move into a different culture, you have to fight the stereotypes or deal with them, however, or embrace them. I personally, in a sense, embrace them, but as stereotypes are, of good and bad kinds, it's easy to embrace the good ones, but it's not so easy to embrace the bad ones. How can you change that point of view to other people? How how can you feed him a different kind of information to put on those spots so they get the negative side out, or the things that are not the truth out of their system.
Right. So I think the library powers that be have given us an extra 10 minutes to partially because of some of the technical difficulties.
That's how kind librarians are.
I know, right?
Just extend time.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what I thought we could do was, of course, talk about whatever you want. But I was thinking that, Henry kind of alluded to this a little bit, but we have young people watching today, and what kind of advice would you give them? They're young, they love comics, or they love graphic design, or they they are thinking about how to do it. What's one piece of advice that you might give to them about their journey and stuff like that? So, Bill, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to share my screen again.
Yeah.
And I should come up there. Do you see a ripoff of Andy Warhol?
Yeah.
My advice would be to steal and to break rules and to make mistakes. What we're looking at here is a banned image. This was a T-shirt I had made. It's actually a banner in my traveling Mextasy show. And it's my homage to Warhol, who was, of course, in the 20th century, the biggest thief of copyright who ever existed. So when I got banned from a T-shirt site, a poster site, for posting this on copyright grounds, I thought it was a huge irony. This is my brand, Mextasy, with a ripped off picture of a Chapulín Colorado making the Y. And of course, this is the famous Warhol Brillo soap pads box that changed art history. And I didn't know what I was doing when I started playing with graphics. My advice to young folks would be just to play with the media, not the mediums, the media, regardless of the form that you take. And I guess I'll just end on this one. This is one of my latest Mextasy confabulations. I started taking illustrations from the 1950s of middle America, the ideals of America, the friendly policeman, right? Pointing out to the child, ooh, the very scary Mexican. That's Alfonso Bedoya from The Treasure of Sierra Madres, most famous for the line, I don't need no stinking badges, right? But I put him in the foreground there, superimposed him. It's a real rascuache, chafa Photoshop job, but that's part of my aesthetic. One, because I don't know what I'm doing half the time. I'm self-taught. And two, I like it when it's messy. I like it when it's on the edge. All right, stop share. That's
great. What about you, Javier?
Yeah, well, I teach a lot. I teach a lot of comic classes in fact, I'll be doing one in about an hour here on the same channel. But as far as the advice, I'm going to piggyback off something Henry and Luisa both said. I would tell a young Latino creator, do the stories that you want to do, but don't get burdened. Don't think that you're with that one comic or that one book that you have to represent the entirety of whatever your background is, you're Cuban American or Mexican American, because there is no one type of Mexican or any other group. So because sometimes what's neat about social network is people put their thoughts on their Facebook post or Twitter, and some of them really wrestle with like, oh, I'm not sure how to draw like the correct type of Mexican. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's like, how many millions of Mexicans are there? I mean, so just do the story you want to do. If it has to do with some type of Colombian background or Mayan mythology, whatever, do your research, whatever, research it how you want. But I don't know. I don't think you should be burdened by having to like represent it 100%. Unless you do something like Henry, where you're doing an actual biographic piece. So yeah, you got to get the person's life story and whatever, all the news articles you can find. That's different. That's a biographical piece or a historical political piece. But even then, you probably have flexibility. But tell the story you want to tell just as a creator. Like again, like I said, my background Mexican American, that was my starting point. But I don't sit there and like fret about it. Like, oh, am I going to piss off Bill because I didn't do something the right way? He doesn't care. He's saying do whatever you want. So
you didn't do a story on Laredo. You need to do a story on Laredo.
Oh no! Can we cut the show now? No.
Luisa, what about you? What advice would you have?
I think the advice is think less and do more. Just do it. I mean, whatever you want to say that it's coming from you. I agree that it's 100%. It's like, oh, how about this? These people don't like it, or these people don't like it. You'll be surprised of what a good response you get when you are yourself, and why are you doing this? Oh, just because I wanted to show you this that I was thinking, and this particular part of my culture. By no means ever let the pressure of having to represent as a whole, everything that you do has to be a perfect representation. For me, mine, I base it up on research, but is by no means intended ever to be like historical or trying to teach you something like very specific. Is visual. It's to give you something visual to look at that is interesting, that it comes from, that it has different shapes, different textures, different things to just get your mind going into a different place, somewhere that you probably have never seen, that you have not related to, like my culture, right? So just that. I'll say do more, experiment more, and then later, if you want, you can curate. After you have a whole lot of stuff, then be selective. But think less and do more, for sure.
Good. That's good. Henry?
I'm writing a book called How Not to Make Comics. And 'cause I'm tired of people telling me what to do. And, I want to take a moment to recognize the passing of Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah, thank you.
You don't know what everyone's suffering in a personal way, in a way that you'll never understand, and everyone's dealing with something. So always be kind to everyone. We didn't know that, the Black Panther was fighting a terminal illness while he was inspiring countless lives. And he lived his life, and I always want everyone to live. Like one of the best pieces of advice that I ever received was live life. I worked for a bank. I wrote for 2 newspapers. I helped start a jazz festival. I worked on a film. I've worked for multiple publishers, and I've written and published so many comics. And that's the most important thing, is if you want to make comics, make comics. Find a way to do it. Partner with people. Elevate everyone. Don't do something that you think will get you something back. Do it because it's the right thing to do. There's a lot of people in our community that have taken advantage of people and that have really set us back, I think. And you don't want to be that person. You want to always be the person that's forwarding, that's, looking to see everyone in this panel and beyond do well. I just started printing comics at Kinko's, and publishers aren't really interested in working with me, so I just got to keep self-funding my own comics. And I'm very thankful that I get to work with the 3rd largest publisher in North America, and I have a place that is pretty keen on helping me tell stories on a big platform. So call your shot, be kind, and do the work, and hopefully people will read it. And if not, if 302 people read it, I think that's a pretty good life that has been lived.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so thank you. I will turn it over to Jessica. Thank you to all of our panelists. It was such an honor to be able to speak with you and to be able to listen to you. Thank you so much. Jessica, take it away.
Hi, no, this was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you all for coming. I want to especially thank Louisa for her patience. We made it really hard for her to join this room, but thankfully she was able to join. So thank you so much, Louisa. Thank you, Javier, Stephen, Bill, and Henry. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. We've recorded this session, and so we're going to make this available later on to view and share. If you have any questions, email us at midcitymicrocon@gmail.com. Our next, what's going to be next up on the screen is just a live drawing lunch break where a local cartoonist, Ethan Killett, is going to just kind of draw and fill up the screen. And then at 1:30, of course, we have Javier coming in with a Zoom workshop, Let's Make Comics. So be sure to register for that so that you can attend and interact. And we hope to see you then. I am so happy that we got to have this conversation, and I'm going to go ahead and sign us off so that we can just kind of go on with our day.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.